Hey guys, so this is the third video of my testimony, my story, how I came to Christ, and how I got to the point of actually submitting my life to God and going beyond just saying that I'm a Christian. Today, God is leading me to start off a little bit different. I am going to start off where I left off in my last video, but I was led to read before I hopped on this chapter in Second Chronicles is a book that I'm reading right now. um However, chapter 25 is what I'm on right now, and I'm just going to read it. It says, Amaziah was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehodan of Jerusalem, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, yet not with a whole heart. And as soon as the royal power was firmly his, he killed his servants who had struck down the king his father. But he did not put their children to death according to what is written in the law in the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, Fathers shall not die because of their children, nor children die because of their fathers, but each one shall die for his own sin. So he goes on to explain how Amaziah, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, but you get the point, how he, although did what God had told him to do, he was following a rule book. He wasn't following it with his whole heart. And this is the Old Testament. For those of you who don't know, guys, this is not New Testament. Jesus has not appeared on the earth yet, physically in human form. And that speaks volumes, because for us to have this in Second Chronicles in the Old Testament, it shows that having the law of Moses during that time to be followed only wasn't enough. Your heart had to be in the right place. It says that he did not follow it with his whole heart. The Bible never hid any faults of the kings, of the prophets, of the apostles, no one. They always showed both sides of the story. And that is so relevant to my story. Um, I recently, in the podcast that I'm doing now, I recently stated that I came to Christ. I got to know Christ when I was very young, which I said in my first video of this testimony. I got to know about who he is around 7 or 8. I did not, I was in church from that age to today, and I considered myself a Christian for all of those years, most of those years. But I did not actually submit my life to God until 29, and I'm 30 years old now. I didn't follow God with my whole heart, which you're going to hear throughout this story that I tell. But I was not following God wholeheartedly. I simply knew what the word said. I knew about Christ. I knew about God, had lots of information, lots of knowledge, and I knew it to be true. I knew it made sense and all of that. I believed Jesus was the Son of God, but I wasn't saved. I wasn't saved because I wasn't following God. I wasn't following Christ wholeheartedly. I had not submitted my life to God. I didn't want to submit my life to God. I only wanted to give him a piece of me. And I thought it was okay. I only wanted to give him whatever I felt comfortable with giving him, because that's what most Christians that I saw around me doing. And I thought it was okay. Um, I had to say that because I was led by the Spirit to read before I hopped on the video, but I wasn't expecting to read that. This is, like I said, it's just what I've been reading consecutively. I've been actually going through the Old Testament, and I happen to have left off at Second Chronicles chapter 25. And I did ask the spirit, like, what is it that you want me to read? Figuring that it was something different that he wanted me to read. But no, it's exactly where I left off this morning. And it's the story of Amaziah. And so, with that being said, I'm going to pick up where I left off, which was I explained a little bit of the first relationships. There are three major intimate relationships that I had in my life. Four, if you want to count one, that impacted me in a way that it affected my walk with Christ, right? Because I wasn't, although I was knowledgeable about everything in Christianity, I can't say that I truly had submitted my life to God. So it affected that. It affected me mentally, spiritually, emotionally, in all those areas. Um, I do want to give a run through of why I'm telling this story again. I'm telling this story to help someone else that is experiencing right now the things that I experienced in the past or did experience in the past and just haven't made it to the point of submitting to God. Maybe they just can't get themselves, they want to, but they can't get themselves to trust God wholeheartedly, which was my number one problem in life. Um, so that is the purpose of me telling this story. Now, I left off on the first relationship. The first relationship lasted from about age 14, I want to say, to 20. And these are roundabout ages. Lots of things have happened in my life. I'm not going to remember every single thing. And I've also tried to move on from a lot of things. So not everything is going to come back to my memory, but I know that the most important parts will. And that relationship was very detrimental to my mental state, especially at the age of 14. You know, when you're 14, and I'm going to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for other people. I don't like it when other people project their own lives on others, so I'm not going to project mine on you. But me as a 14-year-old girl, I was very naive, very searching. I was searching for something, which I was pretty much throughout most of my life. However, I was searching for something more than just love. I know I although I had the absent father, so naturally you're going to say, "Oh, well then that's what she was searching for. She was searching for her father's love." Yes, but it's beyond that. It was also just the fact that I was searching to feel something, feel anything. I think we really need to get to the root of that. You're just really wanting to feel anything. And so with that relationship, I accepted a lot that had I been in the right mind state or not as naive as I was, um, I wouldn't have accepted. And that looks like lots of emotional abuse. And I was raised to never take physical abuse. So I was completely aware of that. And I'll get to more of that in the second relationship, but I at that time had no knowledge of what emotional abuse was, especially at 14 or 16 or any of those ages, 20. Um there was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse in that relationship. And I did not find out that the relationship was abusive until I got into therapy at the age of around 25 or 26, maybe 27. When you get into therapy, guys, you learn a lot. You learn a lot and about yourself, about the world around you. I suggest that if you've even been pondering getting into therapy, get into therapy. It's very beneficial. There is no um, liability behind it. So, yes, the relationship was very emotionally abusive. I got lots of, um, around the age of maybe 16, lots of like, "Oh, you're putting on weight." Mind you, at this time, I was pretty much a toothpick at 16. I do remember that I had started eating more, which I mentioned in the last video, just because of I was emotionally eating. I remember the moment to where I said, "I'm going to start doing this." I don't know why I said that. They say when you're a teenager, you're clinically like psychotic, and I think that might be true. Because looking back, there are just a lot of decisions that I made that don't make sense to me today, but um, I've made peace with that, and I'm accepting that this is what happened in my life when I was young, when I was a kid. So at 14 or around 15, I do remember I started turning to food to satisfy me emotionally, which is why I said I was just trying to feel something. So if that wasn't going to satisfy me, if that relationship wasn't going to satisfy me, then I'm going to do something to satisfy what I'm feeling, the pain that I'm feeling, or the confusion. At that time, it was confusion. That's how I saw it. And so when I did start putting on just the smallest amount of weight, that got talked about. Um, Lots of manipulation to the max. Manipulation to the max. I mean, manipulating my friendships around me, manipulating um, people around me that may not have necessarily known me, but just known of me or knew him. And there was a lot of telling me one thing, which I wholeheartedly believed at that age, and acting a certain way around me to get me to believe that this person cared for me, this person loved me, this person, you know, was the whole nine, and then acting a completely different way around others. Others meaning literally anyone. So if there was anyone else around, it would be a different story. And what that would look like is being ignored or maybe just not interacted with in the same way. And so, mind you, I'm in high school. I had classes with this person, and it was a lot of on and off type dating. It wasn't like a full blown, like, oh, we were 100% all in for 7 years straight. So there was a lot of opportunity for him to completely pretend like he didn't even know me in these classes. So that did a lot to my mental state. Um, and then once we got to, I did give my virginity to this person at the age of 18. And so I did continue the relationship once we got into college. I think it lasted for maybe like a year or two on and off. And of course, that didn't last. And eventually I left it alone, um, and hopped into another relationship. Now, I don't want to move on too fast from that first relationship because it has a huge impact on other things that have happened in my life. And there were connections to other people in my life that I care about. I have a friend that I'm really close to that I've been friends with for nearly 20 years. And that first person that I was in a relationship with is related to that person. So this person is still carried throughout these years that we're going to get into. And not only is carried throughout the years, but is um involved in a lot of the choices that I made. So, moving on to the second relationship, I hopped into another relationship with a guy that I met at work, and I'm still in college. And this person was we had a lot in common. That is, I believe, that is how we pretty much clicked. If I remember correctly, we really liked art, and that is how we hit it off. I was in a relationship with him for 2 years, and one thing that I noticed kind of early on is that there was an anger issue on his side, and coming right out of a relationship that I was in, which I experienced the emotional abuse, the manipulation, all of that. I had not healed at all from that, obviously, because I hopped right into the next thing. And by right in, I mean like within like the next year or something. To me, that's right in because I hadn't healed none of anything from the last relationship. So that is years of pain that's just sitting there. And the person I get into a relationship with had some sort of baggage that he also brought into the relationship. Well, the way that he liked to handle things was by his showing me how angry he was. And this person never struck me, but they they were very physical. They were one to like punch walls or like throw things across the room, grab you, and all types of things like that. So that's the relationship I had gotten into. Now, when I got into a relationship with this person, that definitely triggered a lot of things inside of me that also made me just as toxic as that person. So, because I had not healed from the things that I had gone through, I hopped into this relationship with someone else who obviously had a lot going on too, and it was not good. It wasn't good. There was a lot of yelling, lots of fights. Fights, not fist fights, but just lots of arguing, lots of like little things like there it's never okay to put your hands on the opposite, on the person that you're in a relationship with. So there was a lot of touching, but not like it didn't get to the point of being struck by the other person. So had I stayed in that relationship, do I believe it would have gotten to that? For sure, because things just gradually got worse. And I want to say this to somebody. If you're in a relationship with someone who is right now doing things such as grabbing you, or and I mean both ways. If y'all are grabbing each other, if y'all are throwing things across the room, if it's getting physical to any extent, they don't have to slap or punch you for it to be any sort of abuse. Whoever, if somebody is telling you that, they're lying to you. They are lying to you. So if you're in a toxic relationship like that, just know it's not just going to stay like that. It's not going to get better without God, because 9 times out of 10, if you're in that state in a relationship, you probably aren't putting God first. God is probably way back here, or either not in the relationship at all. So, if that's the case, it's only going to get worse. I just want to say that. And if you are at that state right now, and I want to talk to women because despite how the world may think today, let's just go back to the facts. Women are not as strong as men. So if you are a woman that is maybe not as reactive as I am, I'm the type to more so react to what's or I was the type to react to what someone was doing to me. So had it gotten to the point of, you're slapping me across the room, I mean, you probably would have got slapped back. But I just that's who I was. I would have taken it to that point, and that doesn't make it right. The situation is just as bad. However, I knew I was going to defend myself. So that having that characteristic, I think, is what helped me to just leave. But if you are the woman that is a bit more timid, and I'm not talking down on you, I'm speaking to you and letting you know that you should leave. Don't ponder about it. Don't look at the good times that y'all have together. Don't look at the 5 days that everything was good and then the 2 days that weren't, and just say, oh, well, the good outweighs the bad. Those things matter. What happened in those 2 days matter. And it's not going to get better without God. And I'm about to get here to this point too. Don't allow them to tell you, well, I'm going to fix my relationship with God, and then you stay. If your relationship is physical in any way, abusive in any way, emotionally, mentally, in any type of way, leave the relationship. And if they tell you that they want to get right with God, let them do that. Let them do that. You can, if it's safe, you can continue to communicate with that person from a distance, but you don't have to continue to be in that relationship. Because of course God can change anybody. But as far as being in the toxic relationship, leave. And I'm not talking to Mary. I'm specifically talking to people in my situation, which was a boyfriend girlfriend relationship. Now, going back to the story, I was in college. This person was coming over. I was living on campus at the time. This person was coming to my dorm. We spent a lot of time together. And we even went to the same church at the time. So, with us going to the same church, now remember, I've been in church from ages 7 or 8 to this day in 2024. So, so I'm still going to church during this time. I'm gaining information. I'm not just going to church and then going home. I want to stress this part because I want to give you a very good picture of what type of Christian I was. I was going to church and actually learning the word, actually learning the Bible. Like the things that a lot of the things I know today is because of what I learned during that time. So, I wasn't just going to church just to go and then go home. I was a part of the church, active in ministry, all of that. I want to say that. That's very important. Um, so I was with this person. We were going to church, and things had gotten so bad. There's a few times I can just give you a run through that. It's not super important to my actual testimony, being that I've already given you a background of what the relationship looked like. But things did get pretty bad. There was a time where the car, I was driving the car and he would grab the wheel sometimes. I mean, we could have died and gotten into an accident. Like the anger was to that level. Um, I told you things would get thrown around the room. There was one particular night. There were times he would get mad for little to nothing. I didn't even understand why he was upset. And one particular night, I that was one of those nights. I didn't understand what was really going on, but like I said, I was reactive. So at that point, if you're yelling at me, I'm just gonna yell back. That's who I was. Like, oh, you're yelling at me, I'm gonna yell back. You're acting crazy to me, I'm gonna act crazy back. Like that's who I was at that time. And so it had gotten to the argument that night had gotten so bad, and I was in my dorm. Um, I had tried to leave because he wasn't leaving. Mind you, this is my dorm, and that's how bad it had gotten. He had started throwing things across the room. I would try to walk out. He would grab me. He's very strong. um, and so there was nothing I could do at this point. People were walking down the hallway. They're seeing us. Nobody's doing anything. Like I'm literally, the door is open and I'm trying to leave. It had gotten so bad I had to call the cops. And I'll never forget this. The cops told me, and I'm not condoning like everything the cops everything that the cops say is right. What I'm saying is what this cop told me that night was, I see this all the time. And I know that they say this to a lot of people who have that situation going on. I'm pretty sure they say that to every single one of those women. I've heard other people say that they told them the same thing as well. And they were situations that were pretty serious. I didn't, even though all that was going on in my relationship, I didn't see it as anything to that level. But she told me, I know you think it's nothing tonight, but this is going to turn into something else. And then it's only going to get worse. And before you know it, you're going to regret not leaving today. Did I leave that night? No. But I never forgot that. And I think at that moment, it had made me realize what I was in. That was definitely the light bulb moment for me, but I did not leave immediately. So, sometime after that, and I'm not sure if I'm getting the timeline right, but either way, it's still the same situation. We had both gone to the pastors of the church that we were going to. And the result of that situation of going to them and talking to them, almost like a counseling pretty much counseling, it wasn't good. And let me tell you why. I told my side of the story, and he told his side of the story. From what I remember, his side of the story was hardly told because I was the first to speak, but I was interrupted, and then he told how he felt about the things that I was saying. And because the relationship had gotten to the point to where I'm reacting to everything he's doing. I had never healed from my last relationship, so all I knew to do was to defend myself. And it looked like things were toxic on both ends, which they were. But it appeared to people on the outside that, well, this is something that, you both need to just figure out and work through. It appeared as if the toxicity wasn't starting with the guy that I was dating. And it also appeared that it wasn't as serious. It just seemed like we were arguing. And that is how he dumbed it down that day. He also lied about some things. And I'm telling this story for a reason. That night that we had the counseling session with the pastors of the church that we were going to at that time really put a staple on my mental health for years. And it wasn't just that, it was that interaction along with the interaction with the other person that was in my life that I was super close to at the time. In fact, that was the person I was closest to on the earth. I wasn't closer to anyone else. It was a really close friend of mine. And because that friend of mine and the pastors over the church I was going to both had the same reaction, because they both knew the person that I was dating, and they almost couldn't believe what I was saying. So they automatically took it as this is just a very argumentative relationship. They didn't see the seriousness behind the situations that was happening. And I think, I want to say, I wasn't even able to get to that point. I wasn't even able to get to some of the very serious things that had happened between us, because my significant other was lying and they were agreeing to it, and I completely lost it. And after losing it, when I realized I wasn't being listened to, I shut down. And that was it. Now, the person that I was super close to, very close friend of mine, um, she also wasn't seeing it. She only saw, which I think that's what probably hurt me the most, is because this person knew me more than anyone on the planet. So she only saw how I was from the time that she met me. So she's known me for quite some time at this point. She saw me through the whole first relationship. And then she saw all of my reactions in the relationship that I was currently in. But unfortunately, the person that I was in a relationship with had a different persona around everyone else than he had when it was just him and I. And he did a very, very, very good job, which most of the time they do, portraying to himself as this person that was very calm and just was a person that if you push me far enough, then of course I'll go, I'll go there. Or of course I'll get angry. Of course I'll get mad. That is the persona that he had for everyone around us. So he had this ability to manipulate everyone's minds that were actually important to me in my life at that time. And I want I want to say that was the moment I think I would say I lost it, because I didn't feel like I had anyone and no one was listening to me. I had gone through a relationship that was more serious than I even thought at that time. Looking back, I'm like, that was a pretty bad relationship to be in. Um, so I had gotten out of the relationship, and although I continued the relationship with both my close friend and continued to go to the church, both of those relationships definitely changed. The relationship with my close friend became rocky and never was the same since. And then with the pastor, um, things I just saw that pastor in a different light. I saw them in a different light. And so I felt like I was losing my mind at that point. I felt like no one was wanting to listen to me when I needed someone to understand me the most, not just talk to. I had plenty of people to talk to, but no one understood. And it was really bad because the person that I was in a relationship with seemed to be super calm, cool, and collective to everyone else. So it was very hard for everyone to picture. The day I actually left the relationship, it was a night where I was driving once again, and he had started to get angry. And at this point in the relation, I knew that ever since we had that counseling session, like I'm slowly dissipating, like I'm slowly breaking away in my mind. So at this point, I'm no longer reactive. I do remember there being arguments about me changing because I was no longer reactive. He could tell that I was breaking away. And we got to the last night, and he had gotten really angry, was yelling. I don't even remember everything that happened, but yelling to the top of his lungs. I'm driving. At this point, I'm scared because I think he's going to grab the wheel again. Mind you, I'm driving on the freeway in Houston, Texas. If anyone knows about Houston, Texas traffic, it is not, it's the middle of the night, so there's no traffic, but still, like, there's people out. These highways are not safe in this city. But driving on any highway, you would just never want someone right next to you that is angry to that level, like Donkey Kong angry. So, what I did was called my best friend at the time, and she heard it for the first time. And mind you, I've been with this person for 2 years. Um and so she did start to get it a little bit, but I say that to say I did break up with the person and didn't turn back. That was literally it. I want to say I blocked him and just never talk to him again. But in the midst of that, immediately I leaned towards my best friend at the time, and she I knew nothing more than to lean towards this only person who actually knew me the best at that time in my life. I was closest to that person and that person only. And so I went through a time to where around 23, I had literally lost all hope. Very suicidal. I gained a drinking problem. I had already told you I started smoking at like 15. So that picked up for sure. Um, I mean, I was doing anything and everything to numb pain. It was a very, very heavy time in my life. And at the same time, for some reason, I started to spiral, not just about the fact that I was losing this relationship. And the relationship to me at the time was everything. I was a person that from since I was a little girl had always wanted to be married. When people would ask, what do you want out of life, like what is success to you, my answer was to be a mom and a wife. I've never been one to care about like money. In fact, during this time in my life, I had this um nightmare, that and that's what I called it, that I would end up being a person that only made a lot of money and I would be alone. That was my worst nightmare in life. I did not care about money at all. I really don't today, but I just never have been that person. I always wanted, it was instilled inside of me like since I was a little girl. I had always wanted a family of my own. I always wanted to be a wife and a mother. And that is what we were talking about while I was in that relationship. No matter how crazy it was, that was where my mind state was at that time. And so I felt like I had lost everything. I'm still in school at this time, but I'm out this relationship. I don't know who I am. I'm like, wait, what am I doing? Who am I? What did I actually go through my whole life? Because I'm at this age of 23. And um, if you don't know, the early 20s is usually whenever you go through trauma in life in your early childhood, they say, psychologists say that that's around the time where that light bulb clicks on and you start going through that trauma. If you didn't go through it, if you went around it when you were younger, you really start to feel it then. And for some reason, it all hit at the same time. So I'm coming out of this relationship. I'm realizing, oh, wow, I don't know why I just had realized that, but for some reason I had just realized like I really did not have a dad in life. Like I don't know why I had not. I knew that he was absent. I was completely aware of that, but I didn't, it's almost like I had blinders on, or that I probably put them on myself. I probably put them on myself to protect myself at a very young age. But for some reason, I started to look back and realize like the life that I actually lived. Oh wow, like my mom really struggled. It was just us. We ain't have any money. Like my mom had to do it all on her own. I didn't even have a dad in life. Like all these negative thoughts were hitting me at once. And today looking back, I can say that that was nothing but the devil. Like he saw an opportunity, his demons saw an opportunity and they went for it. As soon as I invited one demon in, I mean, I was attacked by all of them. And so suicide comes in, and it had gotten so bad to the point, and I am going to tell this story. Mind you, I mentioned that I was super close and leached onto the person that I was close to in life at that time, which was my best friend. So I'm staying at her house a lot. And there was one night, there's um her her boyfriend at the time had a lot of guns registered to his name. And so there were guns around, and I picked up one, and I felt like I was going to end my life at that time. And she walked in on that and stopped it. And so that put I want to say it was a mixture between everything that I had gone through in that relationship that I had come out of, and the situation of just being my friend during that time in my life put a big damper on our friendship. And I'll talk about that later. But she had gotten to the point to where she started to wonder, like, what is wrong, and was verbalizing that to me. This person meant everything to me. I had a soul tie with this person. By the way, if you don't know, a soul tie is something that happens between you and anybody. It could be with your mom, it could be with your sister, your um, spouse, your boyfriend, your best friend. Like, you can have a soul tie with anyone that you invite into that level in your life. So I was super close to this person. This person was highly influential to me. And whatever she said during that most vulnerable state of my life, I was listening to it. And so at that point, I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with me, blah, blah, blah. And it was just a time of so much confusion, so much drinking, partying, anything to numb the pain. I did the whole nine. And I'm still going to church. I'm still going to church during this time, guys. I want to continue to mention that. And I want to continue to mention that for leaders in the church to make sure that they are aware and pay attention to the signs. And I also want to continue to mention it because there's plenty of people that are literally living this out right now. So, um, yes, I'm still going to church. Because I at that point it was an act. I'm used to going to church at this point. I'm used to wanting to learn things no matter where I was. So naturally, I want to learn at church too. I've always been a learner in life. Still learning the word, um, but not wanting to give my life up to God, not even knowing what it meant. But I did know that I didn't trust God. I knew who God was. I knew who Christ was. I knew what the Bible said to a certain extent. I knew the important things. Something inside of me was for sure aware at this time that I just couldn't trust God. I felt like whatever was happening to me in my life at that time, God was doing it to me. That's what I felt. So that situation, along with the relationship that I had come out of before that relationship, and things that had happened to me in my lifetime that I was beginning to process, such as growing up a certain way and the relationship with my dad, I had saw all of that is as, oh God, you gave these cards to me. This is what you gave me to deal with. Which, of course, to a certain extent, some of those, yes, I couldn't control. I was born into some situations. But everything after that, I had saw that, even that, as God is putting me through this. And so I didn't trust him. But I still continued to learn about him. That's why I had not submitted my life to God. And that's the reason why I was not a Christian. I was not a follower of Christ. That's what a Christian is. So, continuing, I'm going to fast forward to I finished school, and I finished school around, I hope I'm not skipping nothing. But if I skip something important, I will come back to it. So I finished school around age 24 or something. I had changed my major. I was a fine arts major at first. So I did 2 years of fine arts school and then did 4 years and changed it to the career that I'm in now. Do I regret changing my major? This is important too. Do I regret changing my major? I don't regret it. And I think the only reason I don't regret it is because one thing I can say, even up to the point to of the story that I've told you so far, God was always there. Like, when I look back on my life from baby to today, God is really in my life. Like, no one could ever tell me today that I'm not somebody that God called. Like he called me before I was in the womb for sure. Like he predestined my life for sure. That's something I know for sure. Looking back, I knew God was always there. And even during those times up to this first relationship, I told you lots of verbal abuse. He would say a lot of things, and one of the things that he would mention is basically like, I'm not going to make it in fine arts. Like, and I would hear that a lot, even with some of the friends that I had at that time. I didn't always have the best friends. I always had friends that stuck around, but I didn't always have the best friends to have around. That makes sense. So, I switched my major and after 2 years. So at this point, I graduate once I get to about 24, and I am entering my career. Now, I want to state this because this is just one sign of how God was really like super present in my life. And I lived a very sinful life, guys. Like he was there. I don't looking back, I'm just like, why were you there? Like I was out here wilding. I don't understand why you were there, but he was really there for me. There was a moment in college to where I didn't know how the next semester was going to get paid for. And I remember I'd always been, like I said in the first video, have always been a girl of drive. That was that's just in me. So I'm calling the financial aid office over and over again, blowing up their phones. Is there something I could do? Is the blah blah blah? Because I knew that if you get a different person on the phone, you could get a different answer. So um the last time I called them one day, I was on the phone. She basically tells me, still same answer. There's nothing you could do. I'm staring at my computer, looking at my financial aid account, like, where am I going to get this? What was it, like $4,000 or something for the following semester? Like, I literally have no time. And I had completely satisfied my financial aid. And so I get off of the phone with her, and I I don't even know why I did this, but I just refreshed the page, and the pretty much the exact amount of money I needed just popped up, and it said like scholarship or something. Things like miracles have happened in my life. That's just one little old miracle. Just one. God was there the entire time. And so I just want to mention that even throughout my time in college, like everything always worked out. Like, and that's one of the reasons why I say I don't regret ending up in the career that I'm in today, which of course my major was fine arts. I can still do that, but I'm very happy in the career that I'm in today. And I've seen God's hand in this career so many times in so many ways. And I love what I do. So, no, I don't regret it. I know that this is something that God is blessing me to do right now. So, I don't regret it. But even when I was coming close to graduation, there was a lot of talk for my program. It's apparently very competitive. I'm going to go ahead and say it's speech therapy. If you're a speech therapist or going to school for speech therapy, don't listen to them. If they tell you it's super competitive, it's too hard to get a job, it's too hard to get into grad school, it's too hard, please do not listen to them. They're lying. They're lying. They're lying to you. They're lying to you. Don't listen to them. Don't listen. That's I'm not even going to get into that because that's not relevant to the testimony. So let me get back. I was told a lot like it's very difficult to get a job. I even heard stories of people getting out of school and not finding a job for a year or two. I got out of school and I got a job pretty much like literally when I was at the graduation ceremony. I got an email for a job because of course they were scouting out that this particular company was obviously very desperate. So they were scouting out new grads. And so I like start applying for it backstage. Like I'm applying for the job already and I got the job immediately after graduation. Another way that God has always been there for me. And I just told you those two things to give you background on how my entire life went. Like that is literally the setup of my life. The only thing that I honestly didn't get that I didn't pray for, even to this day, is an intimate relationship, because in the past I was praying for that like crazy. That's all I wanted. I idolized marriage to the max. I was idolizing marriage to the max. That's all I wanted. I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be a wife. At one point I wanted to be a mom more than I wanted to be a wife, and then at another point I wanted to be a wife more than I was a mom. But those were my idols. And yet everything else outside of that, God just gave to me. Even to this day, everything there's nothing in my life that like outside of that like that I have not gotten. If I ask for it, I just get it. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm really giving you a picture of how far I was in my walk, how far I was not in my walk with Christ, and how sinful I was. And yet knowing that God called me regardless, and how he kept to his promise. So, around the time of graduation, I'm also something's happening spiritually. As soon as I get out of that relationship and after I get out of that stage of being suicidal, I did go through some therapy. It was not Christian therapy, but it was just my first experience with therapy in general. I learned about like what I learned about how we think and where a lot of my thinking came from. I started processing why I react certain ways, and it did help me grow. It did help me grow, but it also started to excite something in me to where I started paying more attention to what God was saying to me through sermons and through the word. I started learning more about myself. And although I was nowhere near, you know, healed at all. Um, I had learned like what was going on with me and started to accept that there's something that needs to change. And so I did have an encounter with the Holy Spirit for the very first time. I didn't even know what it was back then. In fact, I don't think I've ever told anyone this story except maybe one or two people who I'm acquainted with. These people aren't even in my life. So I've never really told anyone this because before I knew what it was, I was too embarrassed to tell people. I didn't understand encounters like this at the time. And so this is around the time of graduation, around the time of me coming out of the spell that I was in after the relationship and everything. I was coming home from church actually, and I was in the middle of this series that I was watching on Netflix called The Bible. It was really good. I don't know if it's still on there. I don't think it is, but guys, it's really good. It basically is just a reenactment of the Bible, and it's good. Go check it out. And there was this one part. I remember I was eating, like going in on some Wingstop at this moment. And so I'm not paying attention at this moment. I'll never forget this moment. I'm not paying attention to the TV necessarily. I'm going in on my wings, and I hear Jesus tell one of his disciples before he leaves, before he ascends, I'll never leave you. And I kid you not, I feel like I didn't hear anything before that except for the chewing of my wings. I heard that, and I only heard it because I felt something nudge my head to look up. And I know today that that was the Holy Spirit, but I felt something nudge my head to look up, and immediately at that moment that's when Christ told his disciple that he would never leave him. That disciple, I want to say, was like in distress because I can't even remember which one it was. I don't even want to say the name because I'm not sure if that's who it actually was. But that disciple was very much so in distress because they felt like Christ was leaving for forever, and like, you know, he was never going to see him again. And so Christ told him, like, I will never leave you. I'll always be with you. And I knew, I don't know how, but I knew that that was like God telling me that, because that was the number one pain in my life, was loneliness. And so and at that moment, that none of that was processed. It wasn't like I was appropriating it to my life or none of that. I was focused on my wings. But that's what happened. And immediately out of nowhere, I just was overwhelmed with this feeling of the spirit. And I don't know how to explain it, but there was an energy that was going all throughout my body, and I just immediately like started crying. I mean, wailing. 5 seconds ago I was going in on Wingstop. So, at that moment, I'm pushing Wingstop to the side now. I'm like paying attention to what's going on, and then I realized, like, wow, this is God speaking to me. And I will say that is when there was a change in how hard I was going in on the Bible. Like at that moment, I was like, oh no, there's a change that needs to happen. Did I know how to go about this? No. Was I going about it the right way? No, but I did know that something needs to change. And I was 100% going to hop on it. So my relationship with Christ started at that moment. Am I a Christian yet? No, because I have not submitted my life to God. But that's when it really, really started. It went from me doing the acts of going to church to me actually like a relationship has begun. It wasn't a good relationship, but there's a relationship now. And that brings me back to the verse that I read right before I hopped on this video about, Lord, what was his name? Amazaph, whatever his name was. Amaziah. Amaziah, the scripture says that he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, yet not with a whole heart. And that's often what I was trying to do my whole life during that time. I was just trying to do what I knew I was supposed to do as a Christian. I was supposed to go to church. I was supposed to serve in the church. I was supposed to read the word. I was supposed to try to understand the word. Like that's all I was doing. It was very robotic looking back. So that is when the beginning of my relationship with Christ starts. And I'm actually going to stop there. It's a very good stopping point. So I will come with part 4 in the future. And I'll start where I left off. But I do want to end this video stating the main points of the story I just told you. Loneliness was the number one thing in my life. Not trusting God was my number one problem. I did not feel like I could trust God. I also felt like everything that was negative going on in my life or had happened in my life was coming from God. So I felt like I couldn't trust him just like I couldn't trust anyone else in my life who was physically on earth. I felt like he was going to do me just like everyone else. Did I actually, is that what I actually knew to be true? No. I actually knew that, oh no, this is God, he's sovereign. I knew about him. I knew that that wasn't supposed to be the case, but I just couldn't get myself to actually believe like he's going to do me different than anyone else on this planet. I couldn't get myself to believe it. I knew I was supposed to believe it. I knew that much. And the last point I want to make is that I was continuing to go through the robotic actions of what a Christian would go through, which is going to church, serving in the church, learning about the word, reading the word from time to time, even going to the church first when you have a problem. But nothing was done wholeheartedly. So, Holy Spirit is so good. I will come with part 4 in the future.